Hi, I'm Arthur, and this is part 13 in a 20-part series I am doing in order to cover the all-star chapters of Space Marines. The ones you see on the cover of White Dwarf magazines from here to there, and then swiftly dismiss them because you know what? It's just sometimes White Dwarf isn't really as interesting as you'd expect it to be. You know, sometimes you have to give a little preamble for someone to fully understand what the context is. See, the topic of today is such an important part of 40K history that, in general, to downplay its existence would be a major disservice to the community I am trying to foster. See, in the history of wargaming, there are waves, times when people show up, people who get their curiosity piqued, and they show up to see what wargaming is all about. The release of 3rd edition 40K, the release of 8th edition 40K, the Henry Cavill movie series whatever announcement, the launch of Space Marine 2, the list goes on, but I think the biggest one to date, the one that got in so many people that to downplay its number would kind of be the closest thing to actual sacrilege in the 40K community, which is funny for a community who has a very hard time not saying heresy when someone says something as simple as I play the Tau. The release of the little war game that could, Warhammer 40,000 Dawn of War, starring a chapter of Marines that are currently so ubiquitous to the fan base at this point to be almost permanently intertwined with the history of the game. The Blood Ravens, which were in fact made for this game series and had no lore beforehand to my knowledge, there's a lot of mysteries behind them in the modern era of 40K, but I have one that I think I need to dispel at minimum, and a few others before the release of Dawn of War 4, but that one specific one I think is the most important. If there is one thing I know about war, it's that people need a lot of rest, and thanks to GamerSupps, we got you covered. I don't know if you guys know this, but I am friends with a fair few YouTubers in the 40K sphere. Not to flex, but I do make fun of Crackduck for being short all of the time. But if there is one thing you should know, it's that most YouTubers, especially in the 40K sphere, have an especially sleep schedule. I mean, in prep for conventions of any kind, I tend to pull 13 to 15-hour work days to get videos ahead of schedule so that I can, not worry about it while I'm gone. So when I come back, the thing that helps me most right now, I found, is GamerSupps brand AFK, with versions including with or without melatonin. 10 p.m. rolls around, I grab my shaker cup, load up some after hours, and by midnight, I'm off to the land of honk shoe me. It helps fight jet lag like you wouldn't believe. So if you want to help out me and also get a good night's sleep, pick yourself up some after hours or any of the other GamerSupps branded AFK stuff. And before you ask, yes, code BONEZONE does in fact get you 10% off of it. So pick some up and let me know how it tastes. Special thanks to GamerSupps for sponsoring this channel, and let's get back to it. So who are the Blood Ravens? Do they like blood? What are their thoughts on ravens? And potentially even ducks? The answer is, take it or leave it. They think they are cool, and they have never seen one. But to get on to the more important information, the Blood Ravens are stated as a chapter of Marines created for the Dawn of War video game series. I assume this was likely because they just wanted a good jumping off point for people who didn't know anything about the series and wanted to get people in by giving them all the information they needed to understand the chapter. Though due to the popularity of the series, they have been given numerous lore expansions outside of the game, which range from OK to CS Goto, which, yeah, I don't need to tell you about those. They're kind of a meme at this point, but they do expand on some of the lore, so there's going to be a few mentions here and there. The Blood Ravens are a chapter of an unknown founding and unknown gene lineage, which is where we hit our first snag. See, where most people see this, there isn't much of a fuss because this is usually inferred that the chapter just hides it, or it really isn't that important, or you're just supposed to think about it, but it's actually a key component of their history. The Blood Ravens don't actually know who their dad is, but they also really want to find out, which I feel should be pretty easy to, discover. Like, if you remember correctly, in the Soul Drinkers Omnibus, there is this idea of gene seed comparison testing, where the genetic markers of of a chapter is compared to the primogenitor chapter they wish to see if there's a similarity to. With the Soul Drinkers having a bit of an odd issue where due to likely the mutations their gene seed ended up taking, it ended up looking nothing like the material of Dorn or really any gene seed that was on file, I would assume. Though it has been at least partially confirmed that they are at least an early founding chapter of the Imperial Fists, but we'll put a pin in this one because that's a video for another time. They are on the list here. So taking the Blood Raven's gene seed and simply requesting an analysis that would make the most sense, right? But here is the thing. It appears as though the Inquisition is constantly getting in their way, making it so that their origins are obscured, which, to say the least, is a bit suspicious. They actually have a segment of their history that is dedicated to this lack of communication and information on their genetics, the period where the records were sealed by the Inquisition, or at least the points which prior knowledge they have none, and they simply refer to this as the Unfounding, which is a cool name, I have to admit. That being said, as we get to the end of this video, you will notice there is a few options, and I'm here to kind of give you the most unpopular one, and we'll go from there, but we'll leave that to the end. The Blood Ravens as a whole are a chapter that is codex compliant, and even though they are known for being a bit slightly just ever so much on the heretical side of things, sometimes they protect civilians, they fight for the Emperor, they besiege the Emperor, gotta love that Emperor, and they also sometimes respect guardsmen, while also still seeing themselves as superior to the standard Imperial Guard. Arrogant in a healthy amount, with a strong martial culture, they are also very secretive, as they kind of have to be considering all of the things they have. Following the Codex Astartes pretty closely with the 10-company structure, they do have a major difference, which is one of the more standout aspects. And that is, they just have a buttload of psychers. It's this long story about during a brutal campaign centuries in lore ago, the chapter lost both the Master of Sanctity and their chapter master. This led to them being a bit understandably nervous about the future, so their current, at the time, chief librarian, Azariah Vidya, took over as a chapter master to lead them and just ended up taking over the role full time. They had a strong culture of recruiting people with high psychic potential above all else, as they see psychers as the ultimate in prognostication and precision because of the actions of Azariah Vidya. Using foresight to do psychic viewings to understand what the next step is to do these pinpoint strikes, the chapter now hosts probably one of the highest complements of psychers in any Space Marine chapter out there, aside from, say, like the Grey Knights or maybe the Blood Angels. Like, for every normal chapter, it is common for them to have at least maybe 1 or 2 librarians per company, as they are unstable and often dangerous. But with the Blood Ravens, they have several per company, sometimes as many as 6 per, which means theoretically they have something insane like 40 to 50 librarians in a chapter as a whole, which is pretty wild to think, considering there are chapters out there that upon discovering this information would probably pick a fight with them, thinking that this is kind of heretical and dangerous. And yes, it is heretical and dangerous because of the high predilection for psychers in their history to go rogue and evil. Speaking of chapters who would probably want to wipe them off the board on a moment's notice, we have to talk about something before continuing, and that is, okay, the kleptomania thing. Yeah, if you know about the Blood Ravens, you have heard about how they, for some reason, steal shit a lot. But let's actually dive into it and discuss it, as there's a lot to cover here, and I don't know how long this video is going to be. It might actually be just a bit longer than it probably should, but hey, let's get into it. So what have they stolen? To say the Blood Ravens steal the shit out of everything they possibly can has become a bit of a meme. Now, the meme itself is probably not canon. I know most of you probably didn't want to hear that. Like, for those not in the know, what I'm about to tell you is probably going to make you a little bit unnerved, because if this is true, then this is the most setting-breaking bullshit in 40k. But starting, I guess, a little bit in Dawn of War, but mostly in Dawn of War 2 and further, you can actually upgrade your Force Commander with... Oh, fuck. I should probably explain that. See, Force Commander isn't a thing that comes up often, but it does actually come up. It's a semi-official rank of Space Marine. The gimmick behind it, or at least the designed purpose, can be molded to many different situations, but the easiest way to describe it is it's above a captain, below a chapter master, and almost always temporary. The way that a Force Commander is usually elected is to take control of multiple different companies of Space Marines, the same way that a captain or chapter master would for a specific campaign. The main places you see Force Commanders is usually in the Dawn of War series, but I do remember the mention of a Force Commander during the Siege of Vrax, and I think it was with the Red Scorpions, though don't quote me on that. But yeah, your generic Space Marine Ura guy is a Force Commander, and as you play campaigns, you can get upgrades for him in the form of relics and purchase whatever or find them. A good example is in the Dark Crusade expansion side game, something like that. You had this campaign you could engage in, and it would basically allow you to upgrade your dudes with war gear, and it was pretty standard stuff. Really fun. It was this thing that I spent the most of my time on in Dawn of War 1. But the stuff you got for your Force Commander, Davian Thule, was just basically a bunch of Blood Ravens relics and just upgraded war gear. But to give you an idea of how weird it got, you had Chaos Marines in that same game, Elephas, the Chaos Lord that you could play, who could get the Helm of Lorgar, which is, I'm pretty sure he would want that, but yeah, it's a little important. In Dawn of War 2, the meme kind of started, as in a similar fashion, you could get upgrades that ranged from, oh hey, this is a chainsword that the chapter allegedly made to show respect to the Space Wolves, even though it's made from Kraken bone that was likely stolen from the Fenris, but yeah, they probably just stole the chainsword anyway, all the way up to, and I'm not fucking kidding here, fucking Forge Breaker? Yeah, that one. The Primarch weapon that currently Perturabo is supposed to have? Yeah, not exactly an easy find. If you want the whole list, I gotta shout out Astartes Anonymous. Yeah, Tom and his crew made an amazing video discussing all of the relics that the Blood Ravens had. So once you're done here, if you want to see just how wacky it actually gets, yeah, go see that shit, because it does get a little weird. Regardless, why do I say this isn't canon? Two reasons. One, because wow, this would make no sense as to why this chapter of Marines isn't fucking eliminated. And also, some of these things are literally impossible to get outside of Forge Breaker. Yeah, sure, you could probably have found it or whatever, because they have a history of stealing relics and having a lot of forbidden knowledge, but they have a suit of Custodes Auramite armor, which, I'm sorry, they count that shit when it's missing, and if there's a chance that they could trace it back to you, the eyes of the Emperor would be on you like you wouldn't believe. I don't care how good you are at stealing, you're not getting one of those either. And the other reason why this probably isn't canon is it was likely just incorporated into the game to have this as a mechanic. You know, progression systems keep people playing and give people a decent amount of replayability. Like, you need to have some kind of level up style mechanic in order to make the game make sense. So what they did was add a bunch of recognizable names and didn't really think too hard on who would have what. Is it possible that the Blood Ravens are the most successful thieves in the history of the Imperium? Yeah, probably, but fuck me, I do not believe it, because this ties into a few theories that I have later that a lot of people have a lot of misconceptions over who they are, but let's get into a few other things first before we get to that. Let's talk about a few of the key campaigns really quickly, basically the ones that were in the games. I want to discuss that because this is going to set the backdrop for my hottest take about them. So to make a long story marginally shorter, the chapter is kind of fleet-based, but you'd be forgiven for thinking otherwise. Initially, based on the planet of Aurelia, you know, the gold planet, I don't know, Latin names suck. This planet was, in the Aurelia subsector, Stay Humble King. Due to some rather fun excursions by Chaos, the planet itself was lost to the warp, which leads to the chapter itself being fleet-based, though usually sticking to the Aurelia sector for recruitment, with their current chapter master, Gabriel Angelos, hailing from the planet of Cyrene, which is also in that sector, which also he had to nuke due to a mixture of orcs and Chaos womp womp. It's a plot point in the first Dawn of War War game, so it's usually fine after the next one. I know they do try and go back to Cyrene at a certain point, but whatever. Oh, speaking of, the stories of the games are kind of simple. Basically, there's a planet in the first game with orcs. Whoops, it's actually also Alpha Legion, and in 2, there's a planet of Tyranids. Whoops, it's actually the Black Legion, who actually pulled some Alpha Legion shit. I mean, they declared Gabriel a heretic through this weird back and forth with a demon they had been speaking with, but it was chill at the end. Dawn of War 3 didn't happen, but I also like mentioning the side games. I put some decent hours into Dark Crusade, like I mentioned. Shit was pretty fun. Play Davian Thule, who is trying to take the planet Cronus from the Necron uprising that is happening there. It was a massive clusterfuck of people rushing in to secure the area, and thus a lot of communications issues were prevalent, to put it lightly, and this led to you having to fight the Imperial Guard as well as the Sisters of Battle if you wanted to play Space Marines, which that was fun. If I remember correctly, Dawn of War 4 is actually going to take place on Cronus, which means Necrons are going to be a central threat, and then likely a Chaos Force is going to happen later, because that's just what they do. Side note, I gotta say, this is something that not a lot of people have brought up to my knowledge, but during the Cronus campaign in Dark Crusade, that was when the idea of the Necron Pariahs was kind of introduced, which were blanks that were taken from humanity and converted into these cyborg Necron constructs that were used to deal with Psychers, and also just be a secondary command cast for lower rungs. So the idea of going back to Cronus was actually pretty cool. So I think that they could possibly bring back Pariah and even potentially release a Pariah model for 40k if they tend to, I don't know, man, make this game a little more common. But if the Necron are a half-decent threat, I'd love to see them come back. And they're going to be swept aside for a Chaos threat somewhere in the middle, and I would assume it's going to be Iron Warriors, considering their big push right now, but I degrease. The Blood Ravens are a very secretive chapter that prides its Psychers above all else and allows them to maintain dual roles. Meaning, you could have a Psyker who is a captain or chapter master, which is really funny to think about because their current chapter master is just a man with a big hammer, which further side note, addendum, whatever the next step in that process would be, that big hammer, Godsplitter, is made from a shard of Wailing Doom. Yeah, the sword that the Avatar of Cain uses, which I feel explains why the Eldar tend to get wrapped up and hate this chapter so much, but whatever. So now that we've kind of covered their campaigns, a little bit of their rudimentary history, and you can kind of understand where they're coming from a lot of the time, let's talk about something controversial here. Let's talk about their gene heritage and why I think that everybody's wrong when they're talking about how they are a Thousand Sons successor and where that idea comes from. Yeah, that is a theory that a lot of people have, but I think that a lot of it is based off of just circumstantial evidence that is kind of similar as to why people think that the Silver Skulls are a successor of the Iron Warriors. It's just a bunch of factors that lean into each other that seem like it would fit, but it actually doesn't. So where does the basis of my theory come from? It is a common theory that the Blood Ravens are a successor on the Loyalist side of things for the Thousand Sons. And to the credit of all the sleuths that think that, the theory does hold water. Like, they love Psychers, overuse them, to be completely frank with you, have an obsession with collecting ancient knowledge and relics. Their iconography is similar to the Corvidae cult of the old Horus Heresy Legion. Hell, a lot of their most famous quotes are actually references that are in several texts that the Thousand Sons use. So it would make a lot of sense as to why people think this way. But I feel like it's such a 40k fan theory. You know the type, like the ones that think that the Carcharodons are like a successor of hybrid World Eaters and Night Lord's gene seed. Like that kind of theory that I think would be cool, but I think them just being a Raven Guard equivalent to how the Flesh Terrors are to the Blood Angels is a lot cooler. So where does this lead us? I'm going to sit you down and say, son or daughter, but most likely son, look me in the eyes. I want you to acknowledge the bleakness of my existence and tell me 100% that you believe this theory when A, the Blood Ravens have an incredibly stable gene seed and the Thousand Sons at no point did at all. The Psyker culture thing is also cultural, to add that onto, literally because they just wanted to recruit a shitload of Psychers because their one chapter chapter master did that. And B, the whole thing with them quoting the Thousand Sons, that's probably just because they collect a lot of ancient relics and also have a lot of librarians. Librarians have to train, generally speaking, the same way across the board due to the Codex Astartes mandating of it. Rabute Gilliman's not a psyker, so he probably just took the teachings from Magnus the Red and put it in the book, so a lot of psychers probably quote that, except for the Silver Skulls, because they're weird tarot card girlies, but we'll get there. I can almost guarantee you that they just use the words they do because they are just in that culture. It reminds me a lot of, as I said before, the Silver Skulls, who actually have a lot of iconography that is similar to the Iron Warriors. But when you look at their history, it's actually just from their old practices of them being headhunters on their planet before they became Space Marines, whom once they collected a worthy enough head, they would cleanse it, remove all the meat and shit, and then dip it in liquid silver to mount it as a trophy. Thus the icon of their chapter being a silver skull that just so happens to look like the Iron Warriors faceplate skull thing. Thus, the look. The Blood Raven's bird iconography, I can promise you, was probably just made to make their chapter kind of ambiguous in terms of their lineage. It combines a lot of iconography from other chapters. Blood and birds are often associated with many different chapters that might not have anything to do with their progenitor. Like, good example, the Hawk Lords. They are a chapter that resembles the Emperor's children. Purple and gold, but usually purple and yellow, but I shit you not, they are a successor of the Ultramarines. So the name Blood Ravens is a bit ambiguous. So what is my hot take here? What do I think they are as a successor of, and why I think you all need to really kind of acknowledge the brass tacks here? From the way that I see it, there are three possibilities. Possibility number one, as much as having blood in the name is ambiguous, most chapters with blood, flesh, or brain in their chapter name are usually successors of the Blood Angels. See, it's pretty common for them to exist. The color scheme fits, and even something no one really talks about is that the Blood Angels do have a very high predilection towards psychers. Yeah, that's just kind of a thing that you see with them a lot. They have a lot of librarians, and hell, they're the only chapter that has librarian dreadnoughts, for fuck's sake. So I think it does fit them a lot. Now, do I think that this is likely? No, but I do think that there is a possibility of it. The reason being is, again, the gene seed stability. The lack of anything involving red thirst or black rage, which is kind of a non-negotiable when it comes to the successors of the blood. A good example of what I mean is there was this chapter called, I think, The Blades of Holos. Don't quote me on this. It's been so long since I've read about them, but they were an Ultramarine successor, allegedly, who had this weird genetic flaw where every now and then their Marines would go berserk and then they'd have to lock them away in a tomb until they starved to death. Well, eventually, Astorath the Grim showed up and was like, oh, by the way, you guys aren't Ultramarine successors, you're actually like Blood Angel successors, and now I believe they go by the Encarmine Blades, because you just can't get rid of the red thirst and the black rage, which is what that gene flaw was for them. So, the idea that the Blood Ravens just don't experience any red thirst or black rage kind of does shoot that out of the water, because if they didn't have any of it and they were purely just Blood Angels, I feel like they'd get lamenters pretty quickly, which is never fun. The second possibility, which I think is the most likely of the bunch, is they are just a Raven Guard successor. Relatively stable gene seed, a love for psychers, but not the explode your head with lightning type psychers, more the ones that use prognostication to scan the area. They also have a very well filled out scout company with some of the most talented scouts out there. Hello, Cyrus. I know there is a common myth that Raven Guard successors need to be stealthy, but no. Just look at the Blackguard, who do Tokyo drifts with rhinos into cultists, and the Necropolis Hawks, who... Wait, what do the Necropolis Hawks even do? Oh yeah, that. The Blood Ravens love to steal range shit. The dropping of dudes onto the battlefield through drop pods and attacking at length and melee, catching them off guard, but also having a well thought out plan as to why they do that. It makes sense as to why the Raven Guard would be their lineage. But they also can have a predilection to lose the weird gene mutations that the Raven Guard has, which is, you know, the whole them getting paler and darker hair. But what if I told you there is a third option? I'm gonna throw this one out there because, well, the thing is, the Raven Guard account for everything except for one aspect, and that is the Inquisition's weirdly high level of scrutiny that leads them to creeping around the Blood Ravens a lot. See, the Blood Ravens aren't the only ones that the Inquisition tend to kind of fuck around with. A good example is the modern incarnation of the Soul Drinkers have Inquisition staff around them a lot because the Soul Drinkers are constantly trying to make honor towards their old chapter that was completely wiped out, and they don't even know truly if that chapter was fully a member of the Imperial Fist. It was revealed in a short story that they are, we just don't know what founding. It's a long story, we'll get there when I cover the Soul Drinkers. Also, hi, I'm going to be covering the Soul Drinkers at some point here. The sealing of the founding records, the secret disdain they have to them, and the lack of trust, yeah, it's kind of weird, right? Because there's usually a reason behind it. For the Inquisition, for the Soul Drinkers, it's probably so that they can keep an eye on them to see that their reverence for the old chapter doesn't turn into, well, I mean, they had a few ideas when it came to Chaos and Spider Guys, but like, whatever. Now, when it comes to things that shouldn't exist, there is an acceptable level to this shit. Like, the Exorcists are actually beyond that level. Like, only the Ordo Malleus can know about them. If anybody else knows about them, oh, they're gone. They're in the sun, jettisoned violently. They're like an end movie villain in Dragon Ball Z movie from back in the day. But that's the thing. Their records are sealed as well. So, why I think it's hybrid gene seed. They have a lot in common with chimeric suspected gene seed havers like the Minotaurs, where their records are sealed and they show up without much notice, and not a lot of people know about them outside of the Inquisition. The Minotaurs, people think, are hybrids of multiple different gene seeds, but I think the one that makes the most sense is, if I had to hazard a guess, would be if you took the stability and stealthy tactics of the Raven Guard and the ferocity as well as the collar of the Blood Angels, mix them together, giving them the stability and precision, you'd get the Blood Ravens. It just seems like a perfect merging of the two tactics. It makes a lot of sense. The amount of psychers, but not so much the psychers that summon blood-based attacks, the lack of the red thirst, the amount of snipers and high-quality marines that are very generalist, albeit still really good at their specialities, and also the fact that the chapter master has a fucked up thunderhammer and is probably one of the scariest men in the setting, but also the chapter's ability to field a lot of marines with chainswords, and also no one bats an eye. I think it makes sense. I think it's a brilliant idea, and I also think that it is totally incorrect. Like, that is the most 40k fan theory that I could have come up with. They are probably just like a Dark Angels successor made by the Inquisition as an attempt to uncover the secrets of the Dark Angels and find out about the Fallen, because the Inquisition has constantly suspected them for a little bit. So they just stole some gene seed to make a new one. But I mean, what are the chances of that? In before, like, I just get a cease and desist from GW because I just cracked the code. But that's just a theory. A lame theory. God, I'm so unfunny. It hurts sometimes. Anyway, what do you all think about the Blood Ravens? Do you like them? Do you hate them? Do you think they are some psyop to infiltrate the Dark Angels? Let me know down below in the comments, and also remember to like and subscribe as it helps the channel out a lot. Special thanks to my channel members for supporting me. With your help, I am able to get all these videos done, and by the time you're watching this, I should be home from Adepticon at least relatively soon. I'm bad at math, so don't question that. I really appreciate that. So thank you all for your support. And thank you all once again for watching. Till next time, I hope you all have a wonderful night.